You will notice actually in your bulletin that there's an insert here today for the message and the reading of God's Word. Um, Here, just FYI, it's essentially a summary of the sermon. So there are three subtopics, which will be the 3 points of the message. And I'll just be reading one verse from each section. Wise words, foolish words, and how do I get wise words? And I want to explain a little bit about what I'm trying to do. People may look at this and feel, oh my goodness, it's going to be a long message. And I think it might be a little bit, but a lot of verses here. But I guess sort of my idea is that I'm going to throw out a bunch of darts of verses here. So I don't expect everyone to remember every verse or every point, but I think by the Spirit and the Word of God, it could touch and pierce everyone's hearts. So I'm sort of scattering these verses out, sort of like darts that may, hopefully by the power of the Spirit, land upon the target of your soul, and that you could learn something about communication and gospel words. And so that's sort of my thinking and hope and prayer that we'll be able to do this. And with that said, if I could kindly ask everyone to please rise for the reading of God's Word. Again, 3 verses. Proverbs 16:13, 12:18, and 16:23. Please give your undivided attention to the reading of God's holy, inerrant, and his infallible word. 16:13. Righteous lips are the delight of a king, and he loves him who speaks what is right. Proverbs 12:18. There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Last, 16:23. The heart of the wise makes his speech judicious and adds persuasiveness to his lips. This is the reading of the word of the Lord. Please be seated at this time. So we're continuing along in our series here for the month of December as we close out the year 2014 and segue into our new year 2015. And again, as a reminder, we're doing this series so that each and every one of us can reflect upon our lives honestly and sincerely. How faithful of a church member have you been? What criteria do you use? What does the Bible say about this? And there are 4 parts, 4 sort of commitments that we looked at in the Bible that we will look at. It's not a consummate list, it's not everything, but I think they're important. So last week we looked at participation, and we talked about what that means. And so this morning we're going to look at a second commitment of a faithful church member, which is communication. How do you communicate? When are you supposed to communicate? To whom are you supposed to talk to or about? How are you supposed to use your words? And that's where we're looking at the book of Proverbs, because it gives us the most flexibility to apply this specifically to a church context and church membership. And as you look at Proverbs, just as a reminder, we did a series through Proverbs a while ago, and we actually did a message on Proverbs and words. So I want to remind us, as we reflect upon the nature of wisdom in Proverbs, just a sort of few pointers as we get into the message. Proverbs itself is really a book written to describe sort of the everyday life of the believer. The everyday realities and relationships, the peculiarities and idiosyncrasies of everyday life. That's what Proverbs seeks to address and describe for you. It's very real and very practical. So if I sort of use a war analogy, Proverbs is really for the infantrymen on the front lines, the ground troops who are engaged in the front lines of battle. The everyday interaction, the everyday sort of circumstances, hard issues, thinking, processes. That's Proverbs. It's not necessarily what I consider to be what the 4-star general would be reading and presenting and thinking through, which may be something like the book of Romans. Proverbs is very real. As one scholar has put it, he said this about the book of Proverbs. Proverbs performs the function of putting godliness into working clothes. In other words, it's not a very churchy kind of book. It addresses the issues of our lives. It is intensely practical, distinctly uncomfortable, and immensely profitable. And as you look at Proverbs, when you think about wisdom, that word essentially means skill, expertise. It's a skill of life. That's why, in some sense, you can tell who a wise person is simply by looking at them and not even talking to them, because a wise person has the skill of navigating life with minimal difficulty, navigating life with a sense of cool and calmness and ease. You can tell who a wise person is simply by observing how they live life. That's what Proverbs seems to be saying. It is a skill to navigate the difficulties and complexities of life with minimal difficulty. Do you want to be wise here this morning? Do you want to be able to sail smoothly through life as best as you can with all that the life has thrown at you? Well, Proverbs is your book for that. And this morning we're looking at one aspect of this smooth sailing, and that's communication in words. And in Proverbs, speech is very important. It's actually more important than money. I said this before. Proverbs considers words more significant than money. How you handle your words is more significant in life than how you handle money, because Proverbs is simply saying that money may pertain to the physical cravings of life. The way you speak with one another pertains to the whole spiritual reality of your life. How you speak pertains to your spiritual relationships, where money may simply talk about the external circumstances of your life. And if you look at Proverbs, there's about 55 verses that deal with money and over 150 verses dealing with speech and how we talk to one another. Now, statistics are only so limited in terms of their benefit, but it's telling that there's almost 3 times as many verses about speech than they are about money. And so that's very important, it seems to be telling us, according to the book of Proverbs. So that's what we're going to consider here this morning. You want to be a faithful church member, you have to learn how to communicate well with each other as well as to the session as a faithful church member. So there are 3 points in your outline in that sort of insert I gave you. 3 points to today's message, and we're going to simply look at this. We're first going to look at wise words, sort of descriptions, how to apply it, what does it look like. And secondly, we're going to look at foolish words. And then third, we're going to answer the question, how do I get wise words? And I want you to be reflective here. Think about the way you talk and communicate. Look at the relationships around you. Are you one who is the sort of epitome of what wise words looks like? Or are you someone who is foolish in your words? And if you are you wise enough actually to get wise words through the person and work of Jesus Christ? That's where we're headed here this morning. A lot of verses. I'm not going into depth of all of them, but try to follow along with me as best as you can, and we'll see what the Lord does for us here this morning, how he speaks to us. So first, wise words. Wise words, what do they look like? These are simply just sort of characteristics that I have listed out for you, sort of attributes of wise words. And the first one that we'll see comes from 16:13. And a person who is wise has honest words. That's not really anything too insightful or exciting, is it? Not too surprising. Honest but not false words. Look at 16:13. Righteous lips are the delight of a king, and he loves him who speaks what is right. And what this verse is essentially saying is that righteous lips here is talking about, in some sense, getting an accurate picture of the entire reality and reporting it accurately to the king. That's why this sort of accurate reporting, wise lips of servants, is a delight of the king. He loves it. No, the king here, these words, delight and loves, they're strong. It's saying this king has a strong, exceptional approval of people who have righteous lips because they have an accurate picture of the whole story and they reflect it, they report it correctly. So you have to think to yourselves briefly, do you speak and reflect the entirety of reality as best as you can, or is it sort of narrow? Is it something that your own particular agenda or aspiration sort of characterize your reporting and your talk? Do you have an accurate picture of yourself and people? Because if you do, then Proverbs is saying you have wise words. You have to have righteous lips. Get a clear picture. Get the whole picture. Report it accurately. The greatest point we see from this is when you get in conflict with someone, you only have one side of the picture. There's always 2 sides of the coin. If you want to talk about conflict and move through this, you need an entire picture and to reflect that accurately. Well, we move along, we see that a wise person doesn't just have honest words, but a wise person also recognizes that words have power. They have significance. They have weight. They affect life and death. Verses 20, 21 in chapter 18. They affect power. They affect life and death. From the fruit of a man's mouth, his stomach is satisfied. He is satisfied by the yield of his lips. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. Now, these verses have an agricultural context, and back then, in the agricultural context, if you were a farmer, the way that you're a successful farmer is basically you are a person of your word. That's how you made deals. That's how you made business agreements. That's how you were able to make sales. You were a person who could develop business because you were a person who proved to be a man of your word. So in the agricultural context, it's saying here that if you're a person of your word, you will be satisfied in your stomach because you'll do well as a farmer. And Proverbs is saying this: reliable speech was virtually a guarantee of financial stability in that agricultural context. And then he applies this and says, so too with life. So too with life. That reliable speech will achieve fruitful, constructive results in society. Not 100% guaranteed, but these are sort of descriptions, truisms, maxims. No, generally this is how life works. That reliable speech, a person who is of sound character, that recognizes you have power, will always have, in some sense, fruitful, constructive results in society. That's what it seems to be saying. So if you're here this morning and you're this type of person that says, drama always seems to follow me. Now, why am I always just driving into drama? Well, the problem is because you're a dramatic person. That's what Proverbs seems to be saying, because the driver of your life, your tongue, is always steering you into drama. Because if you're not a person who recognizes the power of words, that you could use it well, then you will be a person who always drives into a dramatic circumstance or difficult circumstance, relationally, circumstantially, whatever that may be. So if you're a person that says, I'm always in drama relationally, financially, vocationally, you may be in that situation because your tongue doesn't seem to grasp the reality that it has power and is steering you into drama. That's why in verse 20 here, it's an oxymoron. It says, you are full from what comes out of your mouth. How can you be full from something that comes out of your mouth? You're full from something that goes into your mouth. And Proverbs is saying that because whatever you say will impact others, but it also impacts yourself. You're always going into drama? That's because the words that flow out of your mouth are steering you into drama. It'll impact people around you, but it'll also impact yourself. That's what Proverbs says. You will eat the consequences of whatever comes out of your mouth. They have that saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But Proverbs is saying this, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words, they can crush your soul. Anybody here have what they call daddy issues? If I had to make a guess, that'd be all of us. Mommy issues. See, you could take months to heal a broken bone, but harsh words over years from a parent may take a lifetime to get through. And I know for sure, including myself, that words that are said by your parent have a lasting sting for the rest of your life. That's the power of words, isn't it? You have to recognize this. A wise person has honest words, but recognizes the power of words. A wise person sees that. And at the end of the day, speech affects more than just physical life and death. It speaks of relationship and community and lack thereof it. Your speech has the power to build up community or to break it. A deadly tongue can disrupt community, but it can also break community. Those who love it, according to 20 to 21, those who love the tongue means that those who love the tongue understand the power of the tongue, and then you take great care to use it. You got to take greater care of the tongue than you do with your bank account. That's what Proverbs is saying. If you are a wise person, you understand the power of the tongue, you will be very careful of how you use the tongue. That is what Proverbs is saying. You want gospel communication, faithful commitment of a faithful church member, you got to learn how to communicate well. A gospel communication, that's what it's saying. And quickly as we move along through this, a person who has gospel words, wise words, is really a person who is a fountain of life, 13:14. The teaching of the wise is a fountain of life, that one may turn away from the snares of death. Your words here are both essentially this. They'll give you life, the teaching of the wise, the word, the law of God, will give you life, but it'll also steer you away from death. It'll give you sustenance, but also steer you away from danger. That's what words does. Do you realize that's what words can actually do? The way you speak, literally and circumstantially, could steer you away from danger, but also could be a source of life. And that's why in 10:21 it says, it feeds many spiritually. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of sense. See, if you look at these verses, including 12:18, there is one whose harsh words, rash words, are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. A way you can tell that you have wise words, a way that you can tell that you actually have gospel communication, is to look at the people who are around you, to look at this church. Because if you have gospel words, wise words, then people around you will be spiritually fed. That people around you would be able to drink from you because you are a fountain of life. That people around you will have healing because you have a tongue of wisdom that brings healing. A tongue of the wise can soothe hurting, and it can reconcile conflict. Is that your tongue? Is that how you speak? Pascal said this, kind words don't cost much, yet they accomplish much. Kind words don't cost much, but they accomplish much. Those are sort of characteristics of wise words. They can heal. 16:24. Gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body. Sweetness is attractive. Medicines are usually bitter, but he's saying here that gracious words are like honeycomb. They're sweet and they're healing. They're soothing. Do you find people around you are always sort of like arguing with you, feeling anxious around you, sort of feeling a little bit tense around you? Or do you feel that people around you are soothing or are soothed by your words? That people around you have a sense of calmness and peace? That people around you seem to be built up by the way that you talk, by the way you speak and communicate? Because if you are like this, and Proverbs is saying, you may be a faithful church member because you grasp the significance of communication in words. That's what Proverbs seems to be saying. Now, here's how you sort of understand, maybe more positively, more applicable. This is how you can really learn how to really gain and to apply sort of wise words in this sense. Wise words are calm, rational, and they're not emotional. If you're a person who just says, I'm just going to speak from the heart all the time, Proverbs is saying you are a fool. I don't know who that is, but if you're saying, I just want to speak from passion, I want to just speak what I'm passionate about, what I feel, Proverbs is saying you are a fool. Because wise words are calm. They're rational. It's not devoid of heart, but they're also informed by thinking. Rational, 18:13. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is folly and shame. Impulsive talking. You speak before you listen. You're rational, you're emotional, you can't hold it in. You got to blurt something out. Proverbs is saying, you may be a fool. Because wise words are calm. They're cool and they're collected. See, friends, this is what Proverbs is saying. Proverbs is saying, this verse here is saying that mature communicators improve their speaking abilities not by talking more, but by listening better. Isn't that kind of ironic? You want to be a better communicator? You actually, ironically, have to be a better listener. That's what this verse is really saying. Better listeners lead to better communicators. If you're taking up 90% of the airtime in a conversation, most likely, or probably, you are not a gospel communicator. That's what Proverbs is simply saying. And in 15:1, it adds to that, and it says that wise words also are gentle and peaceable. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And a person who is characterized by wise words are not only soothing, and not only are good listeners, but their words are gentle, and they turn away wrath. Now, be honest with yourself here this morning. Among your friends, when you speak, is there always like an argument, a sort of debate, a sort of banter? Now, if that's the case, if that's constantly descriptive of your relationships, and Proverbs is saying you don't necessarily have wise words. Wise words is someone who's very peaceful. Your goal here is really peace. A soft answer can turn away wrath. Now, I've experienced it time and time again. I never have failed in pastoral ministry when I'm personally offended or where there's somebody who's done something wrong, where my inclination and gut instinct is to really yell at them. And a couple of times I've done that. I was harsh with my words. I didn't think about it. And then the fruit of that has been much more detrimental and negative than the many times I strive with all my might to be gentle in counseling sessions or discussions, to be patient and peaceable. Now, it's hard to actually do that, but the fruit of this and the effect on the person is almost diametrically opposed. It's very different. So if you're a person that's sort of like the lion, the tiger, always up in people's faces just barking at them, take a moment and step back and say, let me give a peaceful, a gentle word that turns away wrath. See what the person does. See how they respond. See if it builds up community. Because if it does, then you can see in your experience, Proverbs, the Word of God, actually is right. And along with this, as we move along, and we conclude point 1 about wise words, they're gentle, they're peaceable, they're honest, you understand the power of words, they build up community. They're also apt and timely. And this is actually a good way to apply this to church membership. 15:23. To make an apt answer is a joy to a man, and a word in season, how good it is. Sometimes the fewest of words at the right moment can have the best impact rather than a treatise on the wrong moment. An apt answer is a joy to a man. A word in season, how good it is. Do you know when to say something? Do you know what to say? See, let me apply this to our particular church context. I realize, and I say this gently and understandably, that whenever there's conflict in the church between members, and it's varying degrees, varying circumstances, you get to notice somebody, had a falling out with somebody, email angers you, they usually come to me oftentimes, and I try to direct them back to the other person. Try to work it out with them, or either I'll come with you and I'll try to work it out. Almost never does a person want to go back to the person that has offended them. I don't know if that's exactly the gospel way to communicate. If you have a conflict, if you have an issue, Proverbs is saying apply these gospel wisdom words, but do it in a way so that you can go back to the person in an apt and timely manner. I think that's a legitimate application of this. You want to be a faithful church member? Then you got to learn about gospel communication. And part of that means that you have to be able to, out of love, out of being calibrated by the gospel, to speak at the right time, the right moment with people that you have difficulty or are falling out with. That's why words are so important. If you look at words here and wisdom of words, the entire summation of what words has in terms of the power and the effect and the manner all deal with community. That's why when you talk, you need someone else to talk to. The goal, according to Proverbs, of gospel wisdom and communication is that it promotes community and the life of the church and the family and the body of God. That's how you look at this. So if you have an issue with somebody, I'm not saying go hammer it out and argue with them, but I'm saying the gospel will compel you out of gentleness, out of peace, out of love for the person, to iron out the situation with them. But if you're always saying, no, it's awkward, I'm not ready to do that, I want to make something bigger than it is, well, when you're silent, you're making the issue bigger than it is. You have to go and talk to someone. And another issue here with a faithful church member is really that when you have issues with the church, and this is sort of, I say this and ask for forgiveness, I'm sort of sitting it on my soapbox. If you have issue with the church, we want to hear that. We want to do the best we can to serve you. But come to us directly. I always hear second, third, fourth generation sort of concerns, critiques, criticisms, oftentimes legitimate, but there's always second, third, fourth sort of generation talk. And I don't know exactly what is said. Or I'll hear things that basically say, there's issues in the church. They have issues with the leadership or decisions, but they'll never come and talk to you. And that also may not be the best application of this. If you have an issue, we want to say this. It gives us more work. Come to one of the elders. Come to one of the leaders. Come to me. My door is always open. We can talk about it. But don't sit there for years over years talking and complaining and having even legitimate criticisms about the church, but never actually vocalizing them in a gracious, peaceful, loving way to leadership. Oftentimes this happens, and I'll say this bluntly. People will come into the church and be members, but then they'll leave church without saying anything to the session. That is a bad way. That is not a gospel way to communicate, not only in your church membership, but in simply communication. You came into this church under the authority of the session. We want to serve you. We want to love you. We want to hear your concerns. But when you have a complaint because of this and this sort of reason, please let us know. Communicate to us so we could ask for forgiveness if need be. Help you along the way. Too often, people will come and then they'll leave without giving anybody in leadership of this church any clue or sense of why they left. That is an improper and an unbiblical way to approach gospel communication with church membership. You want to be a faithful church member, you have to think about your communication, particularly as your membership in this church. The gospel will compel you to do that, to cause you to think about this. Well, let's move on. Let's move on to point number 2, foolish words here. Foolish words. This may describe more people than we would like, but foolish words looks like this. First, foolish words, they wound and hurt people around you. Look at 12:18. It says, there is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts. Your words are like sword thrusts. Rash here means thoughtless. You have thoughtless words because thoughtless words will damage like a sword, and they have lasting impact and effect. A sword is something to the effect where you stab someone, you pull out the sword, but the wound is always there. The damage has already been done. You're bleeding. There's nothing that you can do. You can't take that action back. Words in some way function in that way. Frederick Robertson once said this. You can tame a wild beast. You can stop a forest from growing because you can cut the trees down. But when it comes to trying to stop the progress of a cruel word, there is nothing you can do to stop that. Because an uttered, carelessly said word will have effects for the years to come. That is what the Proverbs is saying here. Your foolish words will hurt. They're rash, they're thoughtless, and you can never get that back. And that's why foolish words will kill community. In 1628, a dishonest man spreads strife. A whisperer separates close friends. He's talking about a slanderer here, a gossiper. And he's saying that the power of the words of gossip can even separate close friends. Do you want to know what the danger of foolish words is? Is that it destroys and disrupts the unity of the church. Now, I said this before, I don't really remember. But certain sins in the church can create a divide in the church, but they're more like an atomic bomb. Adultery can do that. Theft can do that. There's disagreements that come in a public nature. They're like a bomb that separates the church. Immediately, it's clear, it's visible. But there's something dangerous about words. You know why? Because words can cause a separation of a deeper level, a longer lasting level, but it's not like a bomb that explodes right away. It's something like a disease that slowly seeps into the church, and eventually a part of the church falls away. That's the danger of gossip. That's the danger of whisperers. That's the danger of slanderers. So you have to consider here this morning, do you have foolish words? Do you recognize that your words hurt people? Do you recognize that your words kill community? Do you recognize that your gossip or slander is a way that divides the church like a disease that slowly penetrates the body and eventually you have to amputate a leg? And one way to tell if you actually have foolish words is in this way too, that you talk too much. Too many words. Now let me put a caveat here because I immediately, I'll say this gently, there are actually a couple of people that automatically come to mind that like to talk, say a lot of words, but they're actually very wise. And their use of words is actually very wise. So remember, this isn't a black and white rule, not 100%. These are truisms, general reflections upon life. But generally, Proverbs is saying this: if you talk too much, you're probably a fool. Because when you talk, according to 10:19, you run a higher risk of actually getting into sin. 10:19, when words are many, transgression is not lacking. But whoever restrains his lips is prudent. And he's saying many words increases the chance of you getting into trouble. The skill of communication, friends, is that words must be weighed, not counted. A person who has a mastery of words understands the weightiness of words, not the quantity of words. The weightiness of words and not the quantity of words. As one theologian said, few friendships would survive if each one knew what his friend said about him behind his back. That's the power of words. That's words that are too many. Those are words where you talk too much. This is the type of person in a conversation that never waits their turn to talk. They step out of line with others. They have the need to have the last word. They have to top everyone else's story. They couldn't say, I didn't know that. They always have the right answer to everything. They repeat themselves over and over again. This is a person who may not understand the gravity of words. This is a person who Proverbs says, maybe you talk a little bit too much. It's a matter of time before you go into sin. A matter of time before you're into a difficult situation. These type of people tend to waste time. They hurt feelings. They shatter morale. They need to learn that restraint in communication is essential for prudent speech. See, in 1728 it says this: even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. He's saying this: sometimes silence is actually wiser than a person who talks too much, because a person who's in silence doesn't run the risk of actually getting himself into a difficult circumstance. Even a fool, he says, when he keeps silence, is considered wise. Isn't that the case? Don't you know people who seem very calm, don't really say much? Just kind of nod their heads, and you don't really know what they're thinking, but you're sort of assuming they have a demeanor. Oh, he seems so godly, so wise. Doesn't say much, sort of like a sage. Proverbs says that reality, that experience is true. See, that verse here is telling us this, friends. Oftentimes, it shows that a fine command of language is to say nothing. See, the person who has a strong command of language is a person who's able to say nothing. That is a person who has a mastery over language. And he continues along here as we look, that foolish words don't just deal with talking too much, but it also deals with how you actually talk. So if you're a person who likes to flatter, for example, in 26:28, flattery. A lying tongue hates victims, and a flattering mouth works ruin. There's a difference between flattery and encouragement. Flattery is really about yourself. Encouragement is actually about the other person. So you can compliment someone to encourage them. But if you're complimenting them so that they'll like you, that's probably flattery because it's more about yourself. In other words, flattery here says that it will ruin your life. It ruins yourself. Your mouth is like a gun that shoots yourself in the foot. So are you a flatterer or are you an encourager? Do you say things to build each other up, or do you say things to people to build yourself up? Do you compliment people to encourage them, or do you compliment people because you want to encourage yourself? You want people to like you. You want people to accept you. If you're like that, you're a flatterer. Now, Ken Hughes is very incisive. He says this: gossip involves saying behind a person's back what you would never say to his or her face. Flattery means saying to a person's face what you would never say behind his or her back. Do you see this? Gossip means that you will never say to a person's face what you say behind their back. Flattery is something that you say to a person that you never say behind that person's back. You're always complimenting them, encouraging them. Oh, you're so great. You're so fantastic. You're so funny. You're so gifted. And in the privacy of conversations, you never really think about that person. I think that's a very wise and profound way of actually putting it. Are you a flatterer? If you are, then Proverbs is saying you may be running the ground of actually foolishness. And along with this, he's saying that foolish words are words that are gossipy. In Proverbs, gossip comes out essentially in two ways. It's basically secrets and slanders. Secrets and slanderers. If you're a gossip, you're a person who reveals secrets, and you're also a slanderer. Now think about this carefully. Do you reveal secrets, intentionally, unintentionally? Do you share things that you're not supposed to share? The Proverbs saying is you're a fool because that's a form of gossip. Look at 11:13. Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered. Now, gossip is about secrets and it's about slandering. A person who reveals secrets can't be trusted. And think about this. Whoever gossips to you is most likely gossiping about you. That's how you have to think about it. Whoever gossips to you also will gossip about you. Now, if you're a gossip here this morning, you share things that you're not supposed to, you're slandering people, you're defaming the reputation, but also you're sharing secrets, then Proverbs is saying that you are a fool in the way that you talk and you communicate. You have become a mature person, friends, when keeping a secret brings you more satisfaction than passing it along. Did you get that? That's how you know you're maturing in communication, when keeping a secret brings more satisfaction than revealing a secret. If you find great joy in revealing a secret than you do in keeping a secret, then you are young in your communication, and Proverbs saying that you are a fool. And last but not least, for foolish words, you're argumentative. In 18:6 it says, a fool's lips walks into a fight, and his mouth invites a beating. That's what it really says. It's very picturesque. If you are a fool in your words, you are somebody who's always in arguments. You're always someone who actually has to debate. You're someone who talks in a way that you got to be right in the conversation every time. You have to add your 2 cents. You got to be insightful. You're the person who always has to, in some form or fashion, debate with somebody. You ever have that type of relationship when there's some people you talk to, and then you just feel like you're always in a debate? No matter when or what circumstance or what topic, I'm always in a debate with this person. Versus there's other people when you talk and you engage in them in conversation, it's pleasant and it's soothing, it's encouraging, it's insightful. So if you find in yourself that you have this urge to be right, to be argumentative, to be critical, to talk, to debate, then 18:6 is saying you are a fool whose lips is a matter of time before you walk into a fight. You're basically walking in life with your mouth open and asking people around you to punch me in the face. That is what Proverbs is simply saying. Ask yourself, are you always in debates? Are you always arguing? Can you just listen to somebody and say, okay, that person is actually right, that's insightful, that's helpful? Or do you got to give your 2 cents? Are you always debating? Or do you have to be the person, I got to have the last word? Let me say this insight. Because if you are, then Proverbs is saying, you are a fool. So those are gospel words. Those are foolish words. Now, last but not least, as we close out this sermon, how do you get wise words? Now, all of us speak foolishly. That's the promise of the Bible. All of us speak foolishly, but the hope is that we have a grace and a power in Jesus to become gospel-centric, that our words can be communicative, that can build up community. And this is how you get wise words. First, you recognize that wise words comes from a wise heart. Now, it's not about managing the way that you talk. You talk 50,000 words a day. It's not saying just cut it down to 25,000. That may help. But wise words comes from a wise heart, 16:23. The heart of the wise makes his speech judicious and adds persuasiveness to his lips. You have the heart of the wise through the sage's teaching here on love and faith. This heart will constantly place the right teaching on his lips to speak in a persuasive way in a challenging social situation. You want to be wise? In other words, you want to know how to say the right thing at the right time to the right person? You have to have a right heart. The heart is the soil bed of the gospel words that flow out of your mouth. That is what Proverbs says. You got to recognize this. The target is not to modify your behavior as much as it is to look to Jesus to give you a new heart. That's how you'll grow in gospel communication. It comes from the heart. Secondly, how do you get wise words? Hang out with wise people. Walking with the wise will help you be wiser. Your community makes a big difference. In 15:29, the Lord is far from the wicked, but he hears the prayer of the righteous. And here what this verse is saying is that your relationship is important with the Lord. It's not talking about geography or distance. It's talking about intimacy and familiarity at this point. You want to be wise, hang out with wise people. You want to be wise, understand that wisdom comes from the heart. Third, want wise words? Where do I get it? It comes here in prayer, 15:29. Again, the Lord is far from the wicked, but he hears the prayer of the righteous. See, here he's talking about the prayer that will lead to someone to build and cultivate a wise heart. When was the last time that our church has prayed for wisdom? When was the last time that someone has looked to the Lord and asked him, help me to be wiser with my words? Because the Lord is far from the wicked, but he hears the prayer of the righteous. You want wise words here this morning, friends? Recognize that it comes from the heart. Recognize that it means hanging out with other wise people. And ask the Lord to give it to you. And the Lord, ironically, has given you the answer to that prayer. And it comes in the person and work of Jesus. That wisdom itself and wise words comes from the second person of the Trinity in Jesus Christ. Because if there is anyone who spoke perfect words of wisdom, it was Jesus himself. He embodied wisdom during his earthly ministry. The wisdom of Jesus was apparent in all his actions, and all his healings, and all his miracles, and his teaching, and everything that he said. In the parables, in his arguments with the scribes, he spoke the wisdom. He could speak the most gentle of words in Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. He could also speak the harshest of words in Matthew 23:33. You serpents, you brood of vipers, how are you to escape being sentenced to hell? So Jesus knew what to say and who to say it to in the right way. To some people, he says, come to me who are weary and heavy laden. To others, he says, you are a brood of vipers. It's a harsh word. Jesus epitomized the application of wisdom. Even more so, Jesus himself is the source of wisdom. He's wisdom incarnate. He's the epitome, the picture of the wise man in Proverbs. Paul tells us this in 1 Corinthians 1:30, that Jesus is wisdom from God. He is the source of the wisdom that we crave so dearly. And in Colossians 2:3, we see that in Jesus is hidden the wisdom and knowledge of God. You want to be wiser here? Yeah, pray for wisdom. Hang out with wise people. Recognize it comes from the heart. But all those aspects come in the person and work of Jesus, who epitomized and showed climatically the very wisdom of God when he died upon the cross and was resurrected from the dead. That sacrifice, that love, that grace and truth, that community building in a climactic, profound way epitomizes the person and work and the power of wisdom. You want wisdom? Turn your eyes to Jesus. That's why for us this morning, we look to Jesus, who is wisdom for us. We look to Jesus to speak wise words. And Jesus promises us that he'll give it. This is what he says to the disciples in Luke 21:15. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom. I will give you a mouth and wisdom. Jesus says, I will give it to you. You want to be a faithful church member, you have to understand the significance of words. To be able to apply it to build community up, you have to understand the significance, the understanding and the characteristics of foolish words and wise words. And look to Jesus, because he says, I will give you a mouth and wisdom in his death and resurrection. Friends, as we close, I want you to walk away thinking about who Jesus is, that he is the wise man of Proverbs, and that he has walked the path of wisdom for us. And as we walk and talk according to Proverbs, we will be wise with Jesus as well. That we are walking and we're talking like Christ and be conformed to his image. See, the way you want to picture yourself is that as you grow in the wisdom of your words, you are growing in the reflection and the glory and the wisdom of Christ. That all of us out into the world, the more that we grow in the wisdom of words, the more that we actually reflect the wisdom of Christ in our lives. Look to Jesus here this morning. If you're a person who speaks foolishly, look to Jesus here this morning. If you're a person who speaks wisely, even look to Jesus more so that you may grow. Communication is fundamental and foundational to your church commitment. And I pray that all of us will be gospel communicators to reflect the glory and the light and the wisdom of Jesus Christ. Let us bow our heads in prayer. Father, we thank you, Lord, for giving us the Word incarnate, according to John, Jesus Christ. And that in Jesus, you have given your church the clarity and the ability and the power and the example of what wisdom looks like. And so, Father, I pray that you'll cultivate in each and every one of us this understanding, this ability, this beauty of being able to communicate in a gospel-centric way so that we could, to the glory of Jesus, build one another up, to fortify and to build up unity and purity in this church. We could all be a fountain of life, that our words would be soothing and healing to those around us. And I pray that you would help us to do this because you have given us the grace and love and the truth of Jesus Christ. And we pray all these things in his name. Amen.